As was mentioned, my name is Tabasco. My real name is Ethan. I lead developer relations at Particle Network, and today I'm going to be kind of switching it up a little bit with my keynote. I was told that I can't shill Particle too much, and so I want to talk a little bit about why I think chain abstraction is going to be a big reason of what I kind of call the consumer era in Web3. I think that we aren't at a point in Web3 yet, as we'll talk about in a moment, where we are really ready for consumer applications. But I think that chain abstraction will get us far closer to that reality. I'm going to talk about why. Specifically, I think a lot of this stems from the take that I don't believe that we just need more apps. This has been a big debate, over the past few months, especially since Brussels, which is that people have this claim that we're over investing in infrastructure and we don't have enough applications and we just need people to build more applications and that will bring us towards consumer adoption. It's this endless call to you know, the more apps we have, the more consumers we have. And it's not true, as we'll get into in a moment. So I'm going to be talking about why we don't just need more apps and how this is specifically going to push Web3 towards chain abstraction and how it's going to hopefully solve it. The first thing I want to do is set some context. Not to be negative, but I think that up to this point, at this point in Web3's current evolution, we have yet to really deliver on the promises of full consumer adoption, right? Web3 is not an industry yet where there's consumer applications everywhere that are mainstream and everybody's using some SocialFi application. This is, Web3 is still largely a group of enthusiasts and traders and things of this nature. So why is Web3 not really delivered on consumer adoption yet? There's no shortage of consumer applications in Web3. There's not like nobody is building consumer apps. There's a lot of applications. This is a very well-funded vertical in the space. A lot of fundraising, a lot of pretty good consumer applications, actually, like things that make pretty good innovations typically and can onboard some users, not always the consumer users, but this has been a growing vertical in the space. This is a GIF actually that I took on DeFi Llama where I scrolled through the fundraising for the past, I think it was 2 years in Web3. This is all consumer applications, things in DeFi and SocialFi and gaming, and they raise a lot of money. Like this is a massive vertical, but there's no consumers. Where are all the consumers with all these applications, right? We're missing the big point of all of this, right? And so we'll go next. There we go. That brings us to the question, where are the consumers? And so I'm gonna have a little bit of a hot take in terms of the state of the industry that we're in right now and why I really do believe that Web3 is not ready for consumers from a cultural standpoint, from a technological standpoint. I think to start, Web3 is an ecosystem that is ridden with a high degree of speculation. This is what drives a huge part of Web3. It's speculations, traders, people that want to, make money. I don't know, farm airdrops, whatever. So this is a problem because it means that there really aren't many real consumers in the space that are using Web3 for Web3. They're using Web3 because they want some financial benefit from it, which is sort of convoluting the whole purpose of what we're building here. And so I'm going to get into why this is true and how we can solve this and hopefully move towards a more consumer-centric ecosystem. Oh, go back. Okay, so one of the big reasons why we haven't had consumer onboarding and why we are perpetuating this culture of speculation and, airdrop farming or whatever is because developers aren't innovating as much as you might think. Developers are not incentivized to create truly innovative experiences because Web3 is fragmented largely. And so what makes revenue in Web3 is typically two things. It's either taking a common use case like a DEX or some yield farming protocol and replicating it across, 4 or 5 different layer 2s and then earning revenue because users use these protocols because they have funds in this layer 2 and they don't want to bridge it. And so they use your, Uniswap fork that you made in 5 minutes because you deployed it on some chain where it's relevant. Or developers build things that are catering towards a current user base in Web3, which is traders, it's speculators, people that, they want to bet on things, they want to get airdrops or whatever. And so Web3 is not in a place where developers are very commonly creating truly consumer-facing experiences that are innovative, that optimize for UX and user centricity. There are, of course, exceptions to this. Like, this is not the rule necessarily. There are many great consumer applications that are out there, but generally what makes the most revenue Web3 is not the same as what is best for end users. And so this kind of materializes if you look at, most of the largest chains. The applications that have like the most TVL and the most activity are basically the same type of application on every chain. In a lot of cases, it's just the same ideas and the same core concepts, and even sometimes the same forks replicated everywhere with new brands and new names on it. And so this is a massive issue with Web3, because what it does is this creates an ecosystem where we have siloed users, which we're going to get into in a moment, that use applications because some things are convenient for them. They use some Uniswap fork on some niche L2 because that's what's available to them. And then you have users of this user base that are largely speculative. They're here for, trading or speculating on whatever it may be. And so most of the applications in this space, they reflect that need. They reflect the necessity to have applications that cater towards these types of users, siloed and speculative. So let's understand two truths about Web3 at the moment, two things that you can understand to contextualize this problem statement that we're going to get into in a moment. The first thing is that users are what I could call helplessly siloed within specific ecosystems. So if I have funds on Base and I go to an application on Arbitrum, then that application can't access my funds on Base. I have a totally different accounts at a different balance. And so as a user, I'm siloed to the certain ecosystems that have balances in. I need to cognitively manage the balances that I have on different chains. I need to say, okay, well, I have 5 USDC here, I have 5 USDC here. I need to bridge across these chains to use a certain application to pay for this. And so Web3 is incredibly complicated because of this. It's every application that you use in every chain, you have to manage the state of the underlying chain and kind of where you have your funds. And so this creates a pretty massive barrier to entry in Web3. If I want to use the ecosystem as a whole, I need to learn how to bridge. I need to learn, the underlying chains of all the applications that I'm using. I need to learn how to manage multiple wallets. And so this introduces a lot of complexity, right? This is a big part of why chain abstraction is a thing. It's because we can recognize that fragmentation at a user experience level creates immense complexity, and as a result, makes it hard for real consumers to get in this space because there's too much overhead to it. The second thing is kind of what I've been alluding to a little bit, which is that users tend to choose applications based on convenience and not quality, right? So if I'm a user and I have $100 on Base, for example, and there's a DEX there that is good enough for what I want to do, but there's a better DEX on Solana, I'm not going to try to get those funds over to Solana and use that DEX just because it's better. I'm going to use whatever's easiest for me at that moment. So the market right now is a market of convenience, not optimizing for quality. So what can we have that captures users where they're at, which is a problem. And that's a problem because of siloing and fragmentation. Also, kind of what we talked about is that Web3's culture is speculative and niche. It's highly technical. There's the people that are in Web3 are here because they're engineers or, like I mentioned earlier, they're trading or whatever it may be. This is a reflection of kind of the last problem to some degree. Because the barrier to entry Web3 is so large, the only people that are willing to go through these hoops and go through the hurdles of getting into Web3 are those who are here because they want to make money or because they're passionate about the technology. They're not consumers that want to use it because these hurdles are too great for any real consumer to care enough to go through them and actually use Web3 applications. And so this is what results in a culture and an ecosystem that is people who are willing to go through these hoops, which, as I mentioned, is this niche group of individuals. And not this is a bad thing. This is how I got into Web3. But it just means that there aren't as many consumers in the space as we might have hoped. And of course, this creates a feedback loop. Developers build for the audience in the space. They build for the users that are already available. They build for those that went through the hoops to get into Web3, that went through the complexity. And so we have an ecosystem of applications that cater towards these users. Doesn't necessarily encourage new users to get into the space. And so we have this loop of developers building for this small user base, and that small user base doesn't grow much because of the complexity. And so this is how we get to the point in the space that we're at today. And so, as I mentioned, developers are incentivized to build this siloed and speculative users. So users that use applications out of convenience and users that use applications because they're speculating on things. This is, as I mentioned, a feedback loop. It creates a state of the ecosystem where it's hard to generate real consumer adoption. So we have this question of, well, where are the consumers? Well, we don't have a state in the ecosystem at the moment where it's necessarily friendly to consumers or it's consumer ready. Right? Do some waiting to here. Okay. So this kind of comes down to the statement that few are using Web3 for Web3. Very few people are using Web3 because of the technological implications of Web3 or because of some extra benefit that Web3 gives to end users. And few are building in Web3 because of this. There's, of course, a small group of engineers, but again, it all comes down to what people want, what generates revenue, which is not always authentic in this case. And so I just talked for 10 minutes about problems that I think are present in Web3, from culture to technological barriers and UX barriers. How do we move forward from this and actually create an ecosystem that is the end state that we want, which is a more consumer-facing ecosystem that actually generates real adoption, that has applications that people want to use day to day that they maybe don't even know that are Web3. And so what's the path forward from here? Hit a load. There you go. So I think the first thing, as some context, is let's simplify all this down to one general problem statement. This problem statement is that developers lack proper incentives to build innovative consumer-facing applications. That this happens because the industry rewards exploitative, or I guess subjectively exploitative behavior, taking advantage of siloed niche user bases, right? So again, we're building replicated applications across different chains to take advantage of siloed users. We're building applications that take advantage of the niche users in Web3 at the moment, which are, of course, here for speculation, meme coins, et cetera, whatever it may be. And so this is what developers are incentivized to do, and so they lack incentives to do otherwise. So this is the problem in Web3 when it comes to lack of consumers. There just aren't incentives to create truly user-facing experiences. There aren't incentives to create truly consumer-facing experiences. And so the few that try to do this, they either, some of them are somewhat successful, but a lot of times it fails because the ecosystem is just not ready for this type of, for these types of applications and type of adoption. Okay, so this kind of comes down to the solution and kind of what we can understand as 3 what ifs that is going to happen as a result of chain abstraction, at least that I hope. So what if users were a single whole, right? As I mentioned, users are siloed at the moment. So you have your users that have funds on Base and on Ethereum and on, Avalanche or whatever. What if users were a collective? What if users were a single base of individuals that can use all applications equally? Right? What if there was no real barrier to entry in Web3? What if Web3 was as easy to get into and use collectively as Web2? Everything just was another application that you use. There was no necessity to understand bridging or chains or whatever complexity is typically attached to Web3. What if there was no barrier to entry? And then tying in back to the first point, what if all dApps were equally accessible to users? I can go use a dApp on Base and on Ethereum and on Arbitrum. It feels the same to me. Right, so this is, of course, a big part of the chain abstraction thesis that we've been building towards over the past year or so. And so this type of ecosystem where users are universally available and, there's very little barrier to entry Web3, there's a few things that happen. The first thing is that competition ensues, right? So applications that are built for convenience or siloed users, these applications fail because they have to adapt. They have to adapt to optimize for quality. Because if users are a single base, and as a user, I can access any dApp anywhere, I'm going to use what the best application is. I'm going to use what's highest quality. I'm not going to use what's deployed on Base or whatever it may be because that's the closest to me. As a user, it actually doesn't matter to me anymore because I'm agnostic to the underlying blockchain. So I use applications based on what is best and not what is most convenient. This is a huge change that's going to happen for the ecosystem. So applications that don't adapt to this and still build for convenience or siloed users, these will fail. This, of course, results in the need to optimize for quality. So this significantly increases competition in Web3 because every application is now competing with every application. Right now, if I build an application on Base or Polygon, my competition is mostly applications on Base or Polygon. I'm not necessarily thinking too much about the applications being built on Arbitrum or on Solana because my users are on those chains, are on Base and Polygon. So if there's no barriers here, and if every user can access every application, then I'm now competing with every application in the ecosystem. And so I need to optimize for quality. I need to make user-centric experiences. Otherwise, I won't gather mindshare and I won't generate revenue. This is, of course, because users become pickier, they're more opinionated, right? And so you need to build user-centric experiences. You need to build things that are simple and easy to use, that optimize for UX, that are Web2-like, that bring new users into the space. Otherwise, again, you don't generate revenue. You need to build innovative use cases that are new and nuanced. And so this turns into, the only real way to drive revenue in the long term. in this perspective ecosystem, in this ecosystem where users are universalized. The only real way to generate revenue is through creating innovative, nuanced use cases that actually gather user traction. So in this case, users win and also dApps win, and Web3 turns into far more of a free market, traditional free market. There's competition everywhere. The best application wins. Users have better applications that they can access, and dApps can generate value. dApps that actually take the time to innovate and build, again, truly unique experiences, they win in the long term in this ecosystem. Right? So this is a huge part of the chain abstraction piece. This is, of course, a big part of what this event is about. Chain abstraction, it's the removal of users from silos. It's the ability to use every dApp equally, regardless of the underlying chain that I'm on. If I want to use an application on 4 or 5 different blockchains, that's fine. I don't know as an end user. I just know that I'm using Web3. Right? And so this manifests in the removal of bridging. I never need to bridge and I never need to manage multiple balances. I just use apps, right? So this cultivates, it creates the ecosystem that we just looked at, right? A future where users are universalized, where users access all dApps equally. This is what's being done with chain abstraction. This is going to be possible with chain abstraction. This is exactly the experience that chain abstraction is currently creating. So this is kind of like a visualization of what that will actually look like in kind of a meme format, where you have chain abstraction as being a relatively simple innovation. It's the removal of bridging. It's just the ability to use your assets on any chain, on any application, without needing to manually bridge. It's a somewhat small thing, but as we just went through, this small technological change will be a domino effect that will eventually lead to an ecosystem that is consumer ready. Because again, we're going to see market changes, the necessity to build innovative applications, the necessity to optimize for user experience. This materializes in a consumer ready ecosystem with user-centric innovative applications. And I think that is what chain abstraction is going to kick off in the long term. So this comes back to the original question that we opened with, which is, do we need more dApps? Do we just need to build more dApps and that'll be enough to fix all of our problems going through? Eventually, we absolutely will, but not yet. We aren't ready for that at the moment. We are too immature as an ecosystem to be ready for an influx of applications. We need to fix the fundamental problem in Web3, which is fragmentation, a fragmented market. This is a must before we can actually be prepared and ready for true consumer adoption. Which comes down to just very simply, if you build good infrastructure, in this case, good chain abstraction infrastructure to start, then you can build good dApps. This is kind of the foundation of my take on the whole application versus infra debate. We're over-investing in infra, we need more apps. We need good infrastructure first before we can get to a point in the ecosystem where we are really ready for good dApps. And this is still living, I think. But as I mentioned, if you're interested, of course, small shill at the end. At Particle, we're building account level chain abstraction. So we're building something called universal accounts. It is kind of what I mentioned, is the ability to have a single balance that's usable across all chains. Again, you can have an account, use it on whatever application, any chain. You don't need a bridge, manage multiple balances. So you can follow us here. And if you're interested, we're actually already on mainnet in beta. So you can find me or my colleagues here and we'll let you have a try. But that's about it. Thanks, guys.